I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate to any conceivable threat to the United States. We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any department of the United States.
That was 1952, if you can't tell by the grainy audio. We're going to come back to that, but first, I've been away from the mic for a couple of weeks. I've been heads down building something else, but this story kept stacking up in my feed and I couldn't leave it alone. So I'm back and here we are. In a few minutes, I'm going to tell you what the United States government said last week about unidentified flying objects. And when I do, I want you to think about what you just heard in that last clip, because the words are going to sound very familiar. Not similar, familiar. Like someone found the original script in a drawer, dusted it off, updated the acronym, and handed it to a new cast. Welcome to TrapCheck. I'm Darren. This is the show where we slow down and look at one thing, one clip, one story, one moment that's happening right now, and ask, what's actually happening underneath? Today, that thing is the United States government's brand new UFO transparency program, launched a couple of days ago, I think 6 as I'm recording. Covered wall to wall, already generating millions of clicks, thousands of social media posts, a major podcast episode, and at least one deeply disappointed congresswoman. Here's the question I want to sit with for the next 20 or so minutes. Why does this feel like something, when by every objective measure, it just isn't anything? That's not a cynical question, it's an honest one. And the answer tells you more about how information works in 2026 than it does about life in outer space. So let's get into it. On May 8th, 2026, the United States Department of War, and yes, the Pentagon has rebranded itself the Department of War, which is its own conversation for some other day, launched something called PURSUE, that stands for Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. It's a mouthful, but say that out loud once. Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. Someone in a government building spent real taxpayer-funded work hours building that acronym backward to form PURSUE. That is a fact. That happened. The website is war.gov/UFO, which means the government's UFO transparency portal lives inside the Department of War. You can decide what to do with that on your own. So what exactly was released? Well, let's listen to NBC Nightly News tell us.
Tonight, more mysterious images just revealed. 160 government files detailing 400 alleged UFO encounters, including this infrared military video from 2013 of what appears to be an 8-pointed star streaking across the sky. Mysterious white and black aerial blips that defy the laws of physics. More grainy still images of the unexplained. And this image taken from the moon by the Apollo 17 astronauts of what appears to be lights hovering overhead. The astronauts later suggested it could have been ice crystals. Today, President Trump posted, with these new documents and videos, the people can decide for themselves. But there are no reports of aliens or spacecraft in government custody. Many leading astrophysicists remain skeptical.
Just because you see something and you don't know what it is, you can't then say it must be aliens visiting from outer space.
Okay, let's count what we actually got here. 162 total records, 120 PDF documents, 28 videos, 14 images, sourced from the Pentagon, the FBI, NASA, and the State Department. Sounds significant, right? Until you look what's in them. The Apollo 17 photo, the one NBC called lights hovering overhead in the teaser, was explained by the astronauts themselves as ice crystals way back in 1972. That explanation has been publicly available for over 50 years. It made the dramatic cut of a national news broadcast in 2026 anyway. Now, hold that Apollo image in your head for a sec. We're going to come back to it, because within the same week, a documentary filmmaker appearing on one of the most popular podcasts in the world described that exact same photograph as, and I'm quoting literally, the most notable piece of evidence in the entire release. Ice crystals to one person, the most notable piece of evidence to another. Same week, same image. That's not a small discrepancy, that's the whole story in a single photograph. But back to the numbers. The infrared video described as an 8-pointed star defying physics is, according to analysts who study military optics for a living, a known camera flare that occurs when a bright object hits a FLIR sensor directly. That's not a star, it's not defying physics, it's a lens artifact that looks dramatic in infrared and has a documented, kind of boring explanation. The FBI files, described breathlessly as never before seen, were actually previously released versions of the same documents, just with fewer redactions this time. The underlying cases have been in circulation for decades. The War Zone, which is probably the most technically credible outlet covering military aviation, published its assessment on the same day. Their conclusion? The release offers little that is really revelatory and appears to be more of the same. An astrophysicist who reviewed the full tranche said the materials consisted of optical artifacts, fuzzy blobs, and light smears. Optical artifacts, fuzzy blobs, and light smears. That is the complete, unembellished scientific summary of the United States government's landmark UFO Transparency Initiative. Now here's the part I want you to pay attention to, because NBC actually did something right in that segment. They included the responsible science. The astrophysicists got a fair quote. They noted the astronauts' own explanation. They flagged the military facilities pattern, which is genuinely the most interesting question in the entire release. If these unexplained sightings cluster disproportionately around American test sites, the most probable explanation isn't extraterrestrial craft. It's just classified American technology being misidentified by other American military personnel who aren't cleared to know what they're looking at. That's the real story. It's just a little more boring. So give NBC credit for the journalism, but notice the sequence. The segment opens with mysterious images, aerial blips that defy physics, and lights hovering overhead. The responsible science comes after the emotional hook has already done its work. You felt something in the first 15 seconds. The correction arrived 45 seconds later. It's not an accident, that's the structure. Let me tell you about two movies. The first one is Disclosure Day. This is Steven Spielberg's new film about a meteorologist and a UAP whistleblower who insists the public has the right to know the truth. It opens next month on June 12th. That's about 30 days from now. The second is The Age of Disclosure. This is a documentary. It's already been released. It was made by a filmmaker who spent 3.5 years in secret getting access to, by his own description, senators, intelligence officers, admirals, generals, and White House National Security Council members, all going on record about what they claim to know about non-human intelligent life. 2 separate projects. I want to keep them distinct because they're being conflated elsewhere this week, and conflating them actually helps the machine more than it helps you. Here's a slightly edited audio version of the Spielberg trailer.
If you found out we weren't alone, if someone showed you, proved it to you, would that frighten you?
Good morning, Kansas City. Let's take a look at today. Let's. Today is. Today's.
People have a right to know the truth. It belongs to 7 billion people.
What is it?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you. So I'm gonna show you.
What are you gonna do?
Full disclosure to the whole world. All at once.
People keep wondering. Encountering the unknown.
They're coming! They're coming!
They are starved for the truth.
Do you think there could be others?
Why would he make such a vast universe? Yet save it only for us?
Government releases the files on May 8th. Spielberg's Alien Disclosure movie opens June 12th, 35 days apart. Now, I want to be very precise about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I'm not saying anyone coordinated this. I am not suggesting a backroom deal between the White House and Steven Spielberg. That would be kind of believable, but I'm not saying that this is a conspiracy. What I am saying is that this is how the machine actually works, and understanding that is more useful than any conspiracy theory because it's just true. The machine doesn't require a director. It doesn't need someone sitting in a room connecting the dots. It self-organizes around attention because attention is the commodity everyone in the ecosystem is trading on. The government trades attention for legitimacy. Hollywood trades attention for revenue. Media outlets trade attention for clicks. Podcasters like me trade attention for subscribers. Every actor in this system is independently motivated to keep the UFO conversation alive, escalating and emotionally charged. Well, except for me. And then there's the documentary filmmaker. This week, the filmmaker behind The Age of Disclosure appeared on one of the most widely listened to podcasts in the world. And in the first few minutes of that conversation, he said something that I think deserves to be examined very carefully.
And I'm proud to say when the film came out, it created a national conversation at an unprecedented level, and it led to President Trump issuing this directive in the middle of February, super unprecedented historic directive, instructing federal agencies to start declassifying evidence they have of non-human intelligent life and UAP.
His documentary caused a presidential directive. That's the claim. A filmmaker is saying that his movie moved the executive branch of the United States government. Well, maybe that's true. Maybe it's a filmmaker overstating the impact of his own work, which, to be fair, every filmmaker in history has done to some degree. Maybe there's something in between. But here's what's worth sitting with regardless. If the claim is true, then the flywheel isn't just government releases files, media covers files, Hollywood makes movie about files. The flywheel runs in the other direction too. Documentary gets made, documentary creates pressure, government responds with release. Release generates more content, content generates more pressure for the next release. The filmmaker is not outside the machine observing it. By his own account, he's one of the engines. Let's talk about the branding for a second because it deserves its own moment. Pursue. They named it Pursue. This is a government program. Naming government programs is not exciting work. The people who name government programs are not historically known for their poetry. And yet someone, or more likely a committee of someone's, looked at this initiative and decided that what it needed was an acronym that spelled a verb. A verb that implies motion, urgency, chase. Something is still out there, something worth running towards. They could have called it the UAP Declassification Initiative, the Federal UAP Records Release, anything bland and accurate. Instead, they built the word pursue from the inside out, and they made a website at war.gov/UFO to house it. I love UFO. It's not even it's UAP, it's not UFO, but we just went with UFO. That's great. This is not transparency. This is theater with a transparency costume. And the official statements matched the branding. Pete Hegseth said the files had been hidden behind classifications, and that they had long fueled justified speculation. Tulsi Gabbard called it a comprehensive, unprecedented review to give the American people maximum transparency. Maximum transparency delivered fuzzy blobs and light smears, okay? Trump posted on Truth Social that the documents allow the American people to decide for themselves, and added in all caps, "What the hell is going on?" The President of the United States, in an official capacity, concluded in a statement about a federal government declassification program with, "What the hell is going on?" That's not transparency. That's a hype man. Now, let's talk about the people who felt most betrayed by all of this, because they're actually important to the argument. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been one of the most vocal congressional advocates for UFO disclosure, posted her reaction the same day. Her verdict: unless they roll out live aliens and test demo UFOs or actually admit what they know, she had better things to do on a Friday. True believers were pretty disappointed. The scientists were underwhelmed. The only people who walked away satisfied were the ones who generated the content. The media got the clicks. The government got the transparency optics. Spielberg got a cultural runway. The documentary filmmaker got a presidential directive named after his subject matter, and the platforms got engaged. And the audience got 162 records of fuzzy blobs.
Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States.
Okay, now compare that to the Pentagon statement on May 8th, 2026. I'm going to quote this. The Pentagon described the released materials as unresolved cases for which the government could not make a definitive determination based on available evidence. Credible observers of relatively incredible things that we cannot definitively resolve. That's the same sentence, separated by 74 years. In 1952, the Air Force explained the bulk of their reports. A small remainder was credible but unresolvable. No threat, no secret program, still investigating. In 2026, the Department of War released 162 records. They explained most of them as camera artifacts, misidentified objects, and eyewitness accounts without corroboration. A small remainder was credible but unresolvable. No aliens, no spacecraft in custody, more files coming. In between those two moments, 74 years. Project Blue Book ran from 1952 to 1969 and investigated over 12,000 sightings. Its final conclusion? No evidence of extraterrestrial spacecraft, no threat to national security. The Condon Report in 1968, an independent scientific study commissioned by the Air Force, found no evidence supporting the extraterrestrial hypothesis. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office was created by Congress in 2022 specifically to investigate UAPs. Its 2024 report reviewed hundreds of new incidents and found no evidence that the US government had ever confirmed a sighting of alien technology. Now, pursue. Same conclusion, more branding. Here's where it gets philosophically interesting. Because the podcast episode this week gave us something valuable, not the claims in it, but the structure of the argument being made to defend those claims. Stephen Bartlett asked the right question. About halfway through the conversation, he looked up at his guest, a filmmaker who had just spent 45 minutes describing an 80-year cover-up involving crashed alien craft and recovered non-human bodies. And then he asked a simple question.
Could you be wrong?
I don't think it's about whether I'm wrong or Al's wrong. You'd have to believe that senior leadership across the government, the military, the intelligence community that has access to classified information and is saying based on the classified information they have seen, this is a real situation. You'd have to believe all of those people are lying for some bizarre, unexplained reason. So I find that hard to believe.
Okay, that answer, let's pump the brakes and let's hit it for a sec. It's actually a very sophisticated rhetorical move dressed up as common sense. The argument is, I've spoken to too many credible people for this to be wrong, therefore it's not wrong. What that argument quietly removes from consideration is everything that isn't deliberate lying. It sets up a binary. Either non-human life is here and has been for 80 years, or all of these credible people are lying. And since credible people don't lie for no reason, the first option has to be true, right? But that's not actually the only alternative to lying. Institutional groupthink is real. It's been documented in intelligence communities specifically and extensively. The same intelligence community that produced the WMD assessment on Iraq had plenty of credible people who sincerely believed what they were saying. Compartmentalization means that people can have genuine first-hand knowledge of something strange without having complete knowledge of what it actually is. A pilot who saw something he couldn't explain isn't lying when he describes it as inexplicable. He may genuinely not know that what he saw was classified American technology he wasn't cleared to know about. Confirmation bias compounds over decades. When people spend careers looking for something, the threshold for what counts as evidence tends to drop. And then there's the simpler explanation the host actually raised at minute number 46, misinterpretation. What happens if the Tic Tac isn't alien technology? What happens if it's exactly what the most boring possible answer suggests? Just a highly advanced classified American or adversarial drone. That answer doesn't require anyone to lie. It just requires that some people know what it is and most people don't, which is how classified programs work almost always. The filmmaker's answer pre-forecloses all of these alternatives by collapsing them into a single category called lying. And since good people don't lie, the case is closed. This is the epistemological trap fully assembled. And once you see how the trap works, you start to notice that it's airtight by design. Watch what happens when any disconfirming evidence enters the conversation. NASA says UAPs aren't aliens. Yeah, well, NASA is a bureaucracy. Well, some people know the truth and others have it kept from them, right? Elon Musk says his 9,000 Starlink satellites have never had to maneuver around an alien spacecraft. Well, he's operating under classified agreements, and legally he has to deny it. The files show fuzzy blobs. Well, this is just batch 1, so it doesn't have the good stuff. The most notable piece of evidence turns out to be an Apollo photograph the astronauts attributed to ice crystals in 1972. The UAP task force looked into this image years ago and determined it was real. It's just ice crystals. There is no possible evidence that could falsify the claim. Not institutional denial, not scientific analysis, not the release of the actual classified files. Every disconfirming data point becomes confirmation of how deep the cover-up goes. That's not a belief system. That's a closed loop. And closed loops are extremely useful to certain people. They're useful to the filmmaker, who needs the story to stay alive between the documentary releases. They're useful to the government that gets to look transparent while releasing nothing that settles anything. They're useful to Hollywood, which has a 95-minute slot to fill with things that feel momentous. And they're useful to podcast hosts, who need an episode that generates 8 figures of impressions. They are not useful to you. Now, here's the character who has inhabited this closed loop the longest, because he's sitting right here in 1952.
Major Keyhole, as author of the book Flying Saucers Are Real, what is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin. During a 3-year investigation, I found that many pilots have described objects of substance and high speed. One case, pilots reported their plane was buffeted by an object which passed them at 500 miles an hour. Obviously, this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space.
Okay, look, Major Kehoe is not the villain of this story. He was a decorated Marine Corps aviator and a legitimate journalist who spent years investigating something he genuinely believed was real. His frustration with official explanations is not irrational. He represented something deeply human, the authentic impulse to believe that the universe is larger than what we're being told. I think we could all probably agree with that. But Major Kehoe in 1952 is also the filmmaker in 2026 saying Batch 1 doesn't have the good stuff. He is the social media account saying that the real files are still classified. He's the YouTube channel where every upload begins with, "They don't want you to see this." He is the permanent, useful character in this story. The true believer whose continued existence justifies the continued investigation, which justifies the continued press conferences, which justifies the continued budgets, which funds the continued investigation, which generates the next documentary, which produces the next presidential directive, which releases the next batch of fuzzy blobs, which disappoints the true believers just enough to keep them hungry for the next release. The loop doesn't need a conspiracy in order to run. It just needs a Major Kehoe to keep sitting across from the Air Force official. And it needs the Air Force official to keep saying, with complete sincerity, because he probably believes it, that they're still looking into it. 74 years of almost. The Spielberg trailer ends with a question.
For the truth.
Do you think there could be others? Why would he make such a vast universe? Yet save it only for us?
That's a good question. It's an honest question. In its truest form, it's a theological one. And serious people of faith have engaged with it carefully and without embarrassment for a long time. The existence of life elsewhere in the universe, if it were confirmed tomorrow, would not collapse Christianity or any serious theistic framework. The God described in the opening of Genesis, the one who spoke galaxies into existence, who set the boundaries of the sea, who numbers the hairs on your head, that God is not diminished by also having made something else somewhere in 2 trillion galaxies. The universe being vast is the point. It's always been the point. The question of whether we are alone is worth asking. It deserves serious engagement. What it's getting instead is pursue. What it's getting is a flywheel that needs the question to remain permanently open, permanently charged, permanently just on the verge of being answered. Because a settled question generates no clicks, no movies, no press conferences, no acronyms, and no rolling declassification releases to look forward to in the next 30 days. The answer to the UFO question, whatever it ultimately is, would kill the machine that's been built around it. So the machine's incentive is to never actually answer it. Pursue launched around a week ago. 162 records, fuzzy blobs, light smears, ice crystals explained in 1972. More files are coming in a few weeks, okay? The Department of War would like you to keep watching. Stay tuned. Okay. I'm Darren. This has been TrapCheck. Think for yourself.